Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Vocal Advancement Podcast, and I am your host, Tom, joined by my lovely co-host, Heather. Hello.
Well, hello there.
How's it going?
It's going very well.
Oh, well, that's good to hear.
I went to see Come From Away.
Oh, that's right.
This weekend.
How was it?
It was phenomenal.
Oh, good.
That is my review. 5 stars, phenomenal. Must see. You must buy your tickets immediately.
Oh, well, I'm going to go and book then, because it's coming to Edinburgh, as I said, so...
Yes. So I said, didn't I, that I was going to watch it and then I would report back and tell you whether it was worth buying tickets. And my report is run, do not walk, run.
Good. But that's what I'll be doing after this recording then.
It was phenomenal. It's another one of those, a bit like 6, where there's no interval. I shall warn you now.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't realise that at the time, and I went with a friend and we went to the bar to get a drink, and she was like, "Oh, I'll pay for these," and I'm like, "Well, that's fine. I'll pay for the drinks in the interval." And then and then we walked into the theatre, and I happened to bump into an old friend of mine who I went to university with. And he was like, "Oh, yeah." And I was like, "Oh, hi. Oh, I better go and find my seats because I need to nip to the toilet before it starts." And he was like, "Yeah, don't forget to do that because there's no interval, is there?" And I was like, "Oh, looks like I'm not buying the drinks in the interval."
That might be a score in some senses.
Yeah, that was it. I got away with that. Thank you very much.
Nice. Is it still a full show though, or is it shorter, like 6?
It was like it was a bit longer than 6. It was about an hour and a half long.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad.
But it was like, I didn't begrudge paying my ticket price for it. I was like, that was an hour and a half of solid entertainment. It had everything you could want. I laughed, I cried.
Oh, nice.
I got up and clapped along. It was perfection.
Well, you've sold me, so because I love going to see. I was talking to this about my partner. Just like love going to live music, live theatre, and all that kind of stuff, and just like what's coming up. Because we've got tickets for 6 coming up, and we saw Wicked recently as well. And I'm like, what can we go and see now? So yeah, that's on my list.
That's the one.
And I saw because we have the Playhouse up here in Edinburgh, which is ATG, which is the same as quite a few of the theatres in London. So the Tina Turner show is coming to Edinburgh.
I've heard some good things about that. I've not seen it myself.
So I'm quite excited about that. Not yet. They haven't gone on sale yet. It's just been announced. But I really fancy that. I quite like Tina Turner and her music, so I really fancy it. And then, do you remember we interviewed Stephanie back a couple episodes ago? Her student in Germany originated the role of Tina Turner in the musical.
Right.
She came to conference last year and did the musical class for us. And so just as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I remember Stephanie's student was in that, and they were saying it was so good, and it's really emotional, high, low, like laugh, cry, sing together and stuff. So yeah, looking forward to going to see that too.
Oh, I love it. I do love a good show.
I know, it's not till next year though. But...
So we have a guest on today's podcast, don't we, Tom?
Yes, we have Dr. Kari Ragan.
I was just going to say, I'm going to let you do that because I kept saying a name wrong.
Yes, I actually had to ask before we interviewed her because I'm terrible with names. Like, I am so bad with names. And we do, like at conference, we have this draw at the end in the last session, and it's like the wheel of names, and we pull names out. I hate doing it because I cannot pronounce people's names, and I'm always like, I'm so sorry if I've just butchered your name. It's so bad.
Well, it's just that in the UK, if we saw that name, we would say Kari.
Yeah, we would.
And bless her, she did say that oftentimes people in the UK do call her Kari, but it's Kari.
Yes.
I'm like, okay.
And I'm glad I asked because that's respectful.
I was going to say, it is, absolutely. And I will remember that because she said it's like driving a car. And I'm like, right, okay, Kari.
Yeah. See, but then that just sticks in your brain, doesn't it?
That's it. If you were in any doubt how her name was pronounced, now you know.
Exactly. But we had a lovely chat with her. She's lovely.
We did. She was lovely. She was lovely. She was really, really generous with her knowledge. And let's go and see what she has to share with us. She had some really insightful things to talk about.
Yeah. So Kari, welcome to our podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're really looking forward to having a good chat with you about some topics, but we'd love to get to know a little bit more for your kind of background and how you got started for our listeners.
That's always such an interesting question, isn't it? It started in teaching. Is that what you're thinking? So I was very lucky to have a college teacher who hooked me up with a local high school I think sophomore year of college. And I just started teaching at a local high school. And then when I transferred to Indiana University, I immediately set up a studio, contacted the local high schools there, and just started running a business while I was earning my degrees. And so I've just been doing that since I was very young, 19 probably, long before I probably should have been teaching. But, we all do the best we can.
Absolutely. You've got to start somewhere.
That's right. We grow into it. I actually see that a lot on Facebook where people will almost shame young teachers or their students who want to start teaching. And I always think, oh, gosh, let's guide them. Let's nurture them. Let's not be a gatekeeper for starting to teach. They need to know about what their niche would be, right? Who is the appropriate target student? But somebody who has some training, maybe they've sung in junior high and high school choirs and they've been studying lessons since they're 12, they certainly are qualified to teach elementary school, middle school, avocational perhaps. We just have to find our niche.
Absolutely. And so when did your journey kind of elevate you to kind of researcher, book writer, all of the other wonderful things that you do? Like, why did you dive off that board?
Isn't that funny? I guess just a lot of chutzpah or something. I don't know. I have to tell you, while I was writing the book, I had writer's paralysis for sure, because every sentence I was typing, I would hear 20 different voices in my head, it disagreeing with every single word. And I finally had to just let go of that. But I really struggled for a long time. But to answer your question, I don't know. I feel privileged that anybody wants to hear anything that I have to say or read. And I think I've been teaching a long time, 40 years now. I just celebrated my 60th birthday in January. And I think I do have had the privilege to work across a lot of genres and a lot of age groups through those years. I didn't start in academics as a teacher where you are working with the same age group, 18 to 22 or, 22 to 24. Those are generalities, of course.
Yeah.
So I, for the first 20 years, worked with mostly high school avocational, maybe some 9th, 8th graders. And then I moved into the university, and it did change things for me. Teaching at the university with all the way up through doctoral levels, and then professional singers coming to me. And I think one of the other big changes for me was when I started working as a singing rehabilitation specialist on a medical team in affiliation with a medical team. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. And I think that makes a difference because when I started that work, it was very new. Luckily, there had been people doing it before me, but not a lot. But it was a very hot topic. And I talked a lot about it, about that important work and about the training that you need to have in order to do that important work. So I don't know how things evolved for me to be in this very privileged position, but I think Nats Chats probably helped, all my Nats work. Publishing, I don't know, just little bits here and there, and hopefully doing good work, right? Hopefully helping people, both singers and now helping other teachers, and hopefully that perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
And for people that might not be familiar with what a singing rehabilitation specialist is, could you just tell us a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. It's one of my favorite subjects. And I'll refer people to, there are 2 Nats chats I did in 2023 and 2022. If you just go to YouTube and type in Nats chat, singing voice specialist is what we really call it here in SVS in America. So it's a voice teacher or a speech language pathologist who works in a voice clinic. The SLP would be a clinical SLP, and then a voice teacher who have undergone specialized training and study in order to help singers who have an injury or a pathology. There are no licensures for voice teachers, as we all know, as we all continue having conversations about, and that goes also for the SVS. Anybody can just put an SVS after their name and claim that they work with injured singers. If they have a client who had nodules that resolved the nodules and that singer feels like they were a part of that process, anybody can claim that because there's no licensure. But there are some ideals that those of us who have been doing this work for a long time feel they should have specialized training. And all of that's been outlined in different articles. And of course, those Nats chats that I did, we go into a great deal of information about that. Does that answer that question, Tom?
It does, yes. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. I know it's going on over in the UK as well, of course.
Yeah.
There's people that are providing specialized training to help our singers. It's interesting because I think every teacher is going to come across a student with an injury at some point, even if it's just bilateral mid-membranous swelling slightly, just very slight swelling that down the road could lead to prenodes or nodes, right? So all teachers are coming across this, but there really is specialized training. And more importantly, in fact, I should have led with this. The most important thing I can say about being an SVS is you must work in affiliation with a voice team. So I am in constant contact with the laryngologist and the speech language pathologist in order to do my work. It is not my job to diagnose. Just because I hear hoarseness, it is not my job to make any inference about what that might be a result of, especially if it's past 2 weeks. It's not just post-cold. And so I have 30% of my studio probably, I still see about 35 singers a week. Probably 30% of my clients are on that spectrum of they're in some phase, a continuum of their healing, rehabilitation. And and I've done this for 20 years. I reach out weekly to my team and say, hey, this is what we're experiencing. We've hit a roadblock, or I need some guidance here, or what are you finding? And so it's constant communication. It's not a direct line. What I mean by that, healing is not a simple direct line. For instance, frequently I'll have teachers reach out and say, what exercises should I give? One of my singers was diagnosed with nodules. And I think, well, there's no magic exercises, right? There's understanding whatever the diagnosis, let's say it is a bilateral mid-membranous lesions. There's understanding how those lesions impact vocal function, and then depending on what you hear and see in that client, coming up with a protocol to start the process of recovery. Mm-hmm. But there are no magic exercises that I can simply tell somebody in an email. It's really multifactorial and very complicated.
Yeah. It must be a very fulfilling job getting to help singers in that position with injuries.
It is such a privilege because we all know we're so attached to our voices, right? It's part of who we are as a person. And so when that's not working, it impacts everywhere. It's not just about singing, it's about talking as well. And so our ability to communicate is limited. And so they come emotionally scared and concerned on so many levels. And so, yeah, it's a great privilege. I really I love doing that work to help people.
So just to change the topic completely. I did warn you beforehand that this was just going to be us being nosy about the things we want to know about.
Good, I love it.
So, I'm just interested, because obviously you've been teaching a fair while, you know. I'm interested in what you've observed over the years has been the main changes or movements that you've seen within the world of vocal pedagogy, within the world of vocal research. What are the kind of the major trends that you've seen come and go in your time?
Oh gosh, it's so funny. Last week I almost posted on my Voice Studio Facebook page, I think I need to start a support group for managing social media as a voice teacher, because it's, yeah. So I want to be very careful as I speak here. I'm not very good at censoring myself. I'm a pretty just honest, forthright person, which has its benefits and its deficits. All right. How do I want to answer this question? I think that the changes in our profession are so exciting, first and foremost. I think that the next generation of teacher, I mean, you are both much younger than I am, are brilliant already at such an early age. They have so much information. When I was a young teacher, I just taught what my teacher had taught me that week, right? I mean, we just taught what we knew anecdotally and experientially from our own lessons. So I really love how being a voice geek, a voice nerd is cool now, right? Even those of us who hated science in high school, right? Somehow being interested in voice science, we're cool now. So I love that. And I think that's profoundly changed our profession. I think not only the physiology and acoustics, but, Kitty Vertellini and Lynn Heldy and Lynn Maxfield and the others who are bringing the cognitive science into our realm. And so that we're more aware of how we teach. Are we really being effective? So I'm thrilled about that. I run these practicums to help other teachers learn how to teach. And I just am constantly amazed at these young teachers and how much they already know. What I see happening now is a hunger for wanting to know more about how to apply all this incredible information. And that I would say that the teaching the practicums and working as an SVS I just adore. Because I really love observing these young teachers and older, more mature teachers as well are in the practicums and seeing the great work going on and maybe just providing a little guidance from my experience. If it's of use to them, then I provide that. So I guess, yeah, that's what I would say is one of the biggest changes in our field is how much we all know. And I think the pendulum may need to swing back now to how do we take all this information and apply it? And I would say, as far as language, I mean, I'm not about the debates that we all have in our field, but I'm talking about what kind of language, what is useful in a lesson? Because I hear language sometimes and I think, why are we talking about I want stronger adduction in a lesson? Why are language like that? That to me is a red flag. There are times that maybe you have had the student for a very long time. You know them very well. You know their understanding of the voice. Then maybe I might use language like that. But I hear language or I hear people naming muscles in lessons. And it's such an oversimplification. If you're going to name a specific muscle that, the digastric muscle, right? It's a complicated system under here. So I think we want to be careful of, is that useful to our clients in the lesson to name muscles, or is that more about our ego wanting to sound like we know a lot? And I hear this in other fields too. My friends will say to me, in every field you have language that starts to gain momentum. And so people start to use words that maybe aren't useful. I think in the long run. I
I'm
hope
with
I make
you.
you.
No, I'm
Yeah,
so with you.
absolutely.
You're speaking my language right now.
Okay.
I think it's all about understanding who you're talking to. There's a difference between having a geeky conversation between a group of voice teachers where you can
Yeah.
get into the specifics versus talking to, I don't know, an adult beginner singer who barely even knows what the word pitch means yet. You know, you're absolutely right. We have to cater our language to who we're speaking to.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of knowledge, I tell you, the more I learn, the less I feel like I know, ironically. But I get really nervous when I hear or see singers, teachers say, if their student's a little hoarse, and they'll start talking about, well, it must be reflux, right? Or something like that. I think, again, not in our scope of practice to diagnose based on something we're hearing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the middle of a lesson, just talking in a way that I just don't think is useful to really helping the client explore their voice.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, and it's something that we always try in IVA and instill, is that we're not doctors. You know, we're voice teachers, and we shouldn't be treading that line.
No, it's a very clear line. Yeah, it's a very clear.
Actually, that brings me to another thing that I wanted to ask you about, which was this whole concept of evidence-based pedagogy. And this was, when you did a class for us, this was something that it highlighted that a lot of people had got that terminology a little confused in their head, like what you meant by that terminology, because a lot of the teachers were hearing the term evidence-based and they assumed it meant science-based, but that's not exactly what you meant by that. Could you possibly explain to people what this term is and what it means for you?
Yeah, I love, of course, this conversation. So I was hearing and seeing on social media a lot about evidence-based voice pedagogy. And I too thought, okay, yeah, we want to be evidence-based, science-informed now is what I would say. But what happened is I run a conference here in Seattle, Washington called Northwest Voice, the Art and Science of the Performing Voice. In fact, we'll be having our 9th conference this May. And it's laryngologists, speech language pathologists, singing teachers, singers. And it was at a conference that one of the SLP keynotes presented I don't even remember the overall presentation, but put on the screen the slide of the circles of evidence-based medicine and evidence-based practice, and then talked about it. And I did not know, my whole life I've heard of evidence-based medicine. And I thought, it's the science of medicine. It's the doctors making decisions based on the science. So I was blown away when I saw this slide with the 3 circles, the 3 different components for evidence-based medicine and how it evolved to evidence-based practice. And I was in the middle of preparing a big presentation for a Vernard symposium. And I was working around this idea. In fact, I had titled that presentation Evidence-Based Voice Pedagogy something. And I went, wait a minute, we have not defined this term in our field. Evidence-based medicine and practice have been defined in their fields, like really defined. We've got to define our field. And then the most exciting thing about that was, and it's not just about the voice research. It's also about the student goals and perspectives and the teacher experience and expertise. And there is no hierarchy between those 3 important components. They work in collaboration with each other. So as we know as voice teachers, sometimes there's just magic that happens. We could come up with some scientific explanation to our clients about, I think that just what that changed is this system and right? We could make up something. I think the vocal folds maybe thinned out in a different way, or, the vertical phase difference was, changed, or we could come up with all sorts of stuff. Do they really care? No. So I think that that's useful, but there are other times in lessons where I come up out of desperation with some new task or tool And suddenly a change is facilitated in their singing voice. So my point being that teacher expertise and experience are equal to the research component. And then, of course, it all rests on what the client wants. What are their personal goals at any given time? What do they need from us? So evidence-based voice pedagogy, the more we can help people understand that if they want to come along, right, my article has been out since 2018. And then I subsequently co-authored 3 more articles with Lynn Helding, Ken Bozeman, and Lynn Maxfield to expand each component. It's been pretty widely accepted. In fact, I was just, Lynn Helding and I, because she's the Journal of Singing editor, we were just contacted. They were going to translate all 4 articles in China. So, and in Denmark, they're doing the same thing. So it is definitely in our field, people have taken to it, which I am, deeply grateful for. But I can't really claim the work. I simply adapted it from, right? It wasn't my idea. Definitely, I wrote the original definition for evidence-based voice pedagogy. So, but I didn't come up with the idea. I looked at these other fields that I already work in collaboration with and thought, why aren't we doing this?
Makes
we
sense.
Can all stop debating about what evidence-based voice pedagogy means. But it's funny, I was contacted by a colleague recently who said, I want to just be clear, there's this thread, I don't know where it was, where people were still arguing about it. And I thought, I don't have the energy. It's okay if people don't want to adapt it, that's their right. They don't have to. But I think by and large it serves our community. So I hope there's 2 things I hope: that people will understand there now is something in writing around the definition of evidence-based voice pedagogy, EBVP. But most importantly, it involves 3 components that work in equal measure with no hierarchy to each other. And that it's not, that science informed is a part of that, but it's so much more.
Right.
So there's my spiel on that.
I love that. Well, I love it because I think it's really important, because there has been a trend, maybe in the past 20 years, of people who have been, actively seeking out the science, which is fantastic, because
so great.
Previous to that, maybe they didn't, and maybe they should have. And the fact that we're doing that is great. However, again, it's that constant balance in life. If you get too hung up on that, there's so much that the science hasn't explained yet that you are effectively cutting off your nose to spite your face if you say, I'm only going to use the things that there is scientific evidence to prove that it works. When we have all of this circumstantial evidence from our own experiences and from conversations with more experienced teachers of things that we know work, we just haven't done a research paper on it yet.
Right. And sometimes there's just, within the 5 systems of the voice, there's just magic that happens, right? We give a particular cue with an idea that we think will help the client. But I love this idea of then the body reorganizes itself. So it's never one thing. My students will say, oh gosh, this, it was my tongue. It was my this. And I always say to them, it's never one thing. That's the first thing that they all just say that now after they say that. It's become a rote response for me. It's never one thing, right? And I don't want to make them wrong, but I don't want them to think it's one thing. It's 5 systems coordinating. And we're lucky as teachers if we give a particular task, if we do a straw, right? And suddenly the body, we change something at the level of the phonatory system. And of course that changes the breath and changes the resonance. And all of a sudden the body organizes differently. I heard this at PAVA last fall where somebody said, the body wants to work efficiently. So it will if we give it the right direction, it will reorganize itself for that efficiency. And I love that idea. There is something really freeing about it, both as a singer and a teacher.
That is nice to hear. I like that.
Isn't that nice? Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
So
sense.
there is a lot of what we do in lessons, and I'll say this to students all the time. It's like I could come up with an explanation and tell you, but yeah, and I think mostly what I usually say now is just repeat it. Like, don't ask it, just do it again. Do it again. If they have that magic moment in a lesson, which I look for at least one in every lesson, and I just think, do it again. Shut up. Me, shut up, not them. And do it again. Just repeat it, because let your body figure it out. Then we can talk about it down the road. But in that moment isn't the time to talk about it. It's the moment to experience it.
Yeah. I love that. So, talk to me about your book, Kari. There is a wealth of information in there, but if you were to give us a bit of an elevator pitch of your book and explain to teachers who are listening who maybe haven't seen it or heard about it yet, explain your book in a short, kind of concise, this is what it is.
The book was written with my students in mind. I wanted them to have something that felt like they were in a lesson with me. And so the way I teach is, of course, science informed, but it's in the application that it's really important. And we have so many fabulous books out there on the science. Mm-hmm. I mean, right? I am not going to, I could not compete with all those brilliant people who have written so beautifully to help us understand the science. But I felt, again, that the application was the next step, was a needed step in our profession. So I think for me, what I'm proud of about the book is that it gives, in the 5 systematic chapters, right? There's the opening 2 chapters that kind of talk about profession and evidence-based voice pedagogy and a couple other things. But then there are the 5 crux of the book, chapters of each system. And I give a brief overview in each one of those chapters, just enough that if they've hopefully have read, Scott McCoy's Inside View, hopefully they've read, Vocology in Practice, right? Johann Sundberg. I'm sorry, I could write. I'm leaving so many books out, but hopefully people have read all those. So my brief overview will trigger a memory for people, depending on how in depth their knowledge is. Mm-hmm. And then here are the takeaways, right? The second section of each chapter is I called it teacher takeaways, and I wish I had just called it takeaways. That say, why do I want you to know about these antagonistic muscles of respiration that I just gave you some detail about? Here's the takeaways of why I think that's important. And then, of course, each chapter has 15 to 20 vocal exercises within each system. And so I wanted it to be a book that, for example, if I have a new client who's sent to me by the medical team, contemporary singer, never taken a voice lesson in their life, but now they're in trouble. And so I wanted to write the book in a way that that person could read the overview and they'd be a little bit maybe overwhelmed or, right, whatever word we want to apply. But in that chapter, they'd get to the application. But I wanted there to be enough core to the book that my brilliant colleagues who know more than I do could at least read it and find some use to it. That it had something to substantiate why I've designed these exercises. So I think that component of the book was one of the most important for me, that there's something in it for everyone, from somebody who's never studied science to somebody who knows a lot. And then the systematic approach, that part, even for singer, same thing for either a voice teacher or even a beginning singer, that they can have a sense of when they're practicing, if something doesn't feel right, they can kind of scan each system and think, all right, what system do I want to enter into right now? Do I think that what I'm feeling that doesn't sound or feel right, do I want to try and facilitate a little bit of a shift through breath work right now Does it feel like it's more in the articulation? Does it feel like it's the level of phonation or registration? Or do I just need to think of a shift of the vowel shaping through resonance articulation, and that's going to have downstream effect? So it gives people a roadmap to feel more in charge, that heuristic approach to teaching. I don't know about you both, but as a young singer, I just went to lessons and I was quiet and I did what I was told. I would sing. When I got done singing my aria, I'd look to my teacher to tell me what I'd do wrong. Then I'd try and fix it. And off we went. I would never have asked questions or challenged, or that's fine. My teacher, Ellen Fall, was a remarkable teacher. And so I have no objections to that, but I went home and just repeated practicing what had been given to me in a lesson. Now, luckily, my teacher, Miss Fall, ironically, I think a lot of my teaching strategy just came from her, because she would give us a tool or a task in a lesson and have us repeat it, and then show me how to put it back in the context of the phrase and then the whole aria. And so that is kind of what I have ended up doing with a little different trajectory with the systematic approach. But I do think that the template of the systems can be very useful.
Yeah, I love that you're just kind of taking, again, your experience and things that have worked for you, and then layering on that scientific knowledge and coming up with something that makes sense.
I hope so.
I think we should
do
a bit of that.
I've had a lot of guinea pigs over the years. So I'm really lucky, and they have come along for the journey with me, We learn more from our students than are, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, half the time. Yeah.
Well, I'm interested as well, because you said you started out singing classically. So how have you found that kind of movement into working with contemporary singers, having started off your life as a classical singer? Have you found that that's something you've needed to think about, or is that something that's it's all exactly the same things applied?
Oh gosh, no. No. It is, as you all both know, not at all the same, but I love that question. Out of necessity, all of us, right? If you're an independent teacher, at least in the United States, and unless you've become an independent teacher after having sung at La Scala and the Metropolitan Opera, and right, then the chances are your independent studio is going to have a variety of singers in it. There are teachers that can specialize and maintain. And in my day, the first 20 years of my career, right, I only taught classical because that's all anybody wanted to sing. But I mean, not that that's who was studying. But luckily, in the last 20 years, finally, contemporary singers have found safe places, safe teachers. But that was not the tradition 30, 40 years ago. Contemporary singers were going to voice teachers, all who were classically based, because that's mostly, I'm of course generalizing, so I hope I'm not offending somebody who was a contemporary teacher 40 years ago. Please know that I'm using generalizations. They would go to a teacher, classically trained, most likely, and they were told not to sing in chest voice. They were told not to sing a belt aesthetic. And so they would leave confused, or they were told that you have to learn to sing classical technique first. That myth has long been debunked, but I just heard it again last week.
Wow.
Just heard it again last week. So we still have work to do. But so to answer your question, really, it was out of necessity, because I was predominantly, of my 40 years of teaching, I've been predominantly an independent teacher. I did teach full-time at a university for 12 years, but I was full-time there and full-time at home.
Wow.
And so I just have seen our independent studios so profoundly change. Even at universities now, when you see job descriptions, it will say somebody with cross-training. So even at the university here in the States, you are seeing jobs that require us to know both. And I think as teachers, there are two things that I talk about in the book, that the reasons why, even if you're predominantly classically trained, you still need to study and understand contemporary, for cross-training purposes. My opera singers need to learn how to sing. My assigned female at birth opera singers, I still want them to sing and develop their chest registration for vocal health. My belters, the best thing they can do is learn how to develop their head register. I'm again talking about AFABs. So I just kind of dove in, and luckily there were people who were teaching classical teachers how to start to understand the physiological and acoustic differences.
Yeah.
So a lot of information was coming along right at that time, where we started to know that, hey, you don't have to study to be a classical singer. You don't first in order to sing contemporary. And here are the physiological and acoustic differences to help you understand what is changing for those singers.
It's a topic I love to talk about.
Yeah. Do you teach both?
No, I teach contemporary vocals, but I have had time and again people who've come to me having studied classically, having never had the intention of singing classical at all. And it does strike me, you're right, that there are still some people who do believe that you must first learn classical before you learn anything else.
Yeah.
And that's...
Well, and I think knowing our field has changed so drastically the last 20 years. And so I think it's really important that we understand that we can't be all things in our field anymore. You know, we can't be experts in physiology and anatomy and vocal health and genre, the multitude of genres. And let's not forget the fundamentals of being a musician and learning theory, and if you're a classical singer, languages, right? And character study and acting and storytelling. I'm just hitting the surface, right? I still have 25 more things I could list that we're all supposed to know about. It's overwhelming and exhausting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think find the things that really you love and want to share with your clients, and find those clients and then refer out. So for instance, I have a student in particular who's a phenomenal contemporary singer and a phenomenal voice teacher. And so if I'm rehabilitating somebody, I'll get them to that point, and then I'll say, I think you need to go study with this person who can demonstrate those sounds. I have an okay chest voice up to a C sharp D5 maybe, right? But that's my singer sings up through F sharp G in a phenomenal belt aesthetic, like it's nothing, and does all the riffs and the runs. I mean, on my best day, I'll never do that. That's right. That's okay.
That's okay. That's the thing. Yeah.
Right. And I can still teach people to a certain point to get them. But I think, working with somebody who can make those sounds for them that they can then imitate back is much more useful to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or a jazz singer, right? There are people that really live and breathe jazz. I can take students to a certain point, but it's like, no, go study with somebody who lives that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're very big proponents for that ourselves, referring out to other people in those instances, like you say. So crucial for the singer as well.
It is. And our profession, that we're collaborating with each other. Unfortunately, I came up at a time and in a university setting that it was very combative, studio pitted against studio. In fact, when I went into the university setting, I wanted very much to have collaboration and for students to not feel like, it's like, how does your teacher teach breathing? Well, my teacher teaches it like this. You just walked around campus with this angst about, were you in the best studio and what was happening in the other studio? And I don't know, it was just, there was a lot of toxicity. I hate to say it out loud, and now it's out there, but there was in our profession, and there remains some toxicity.
I was just going to say, I still hear reports of that sort of environment in certain places, which is a shame, really. Like you say, with the amount of information that's available now, I don't think there's any reason why you can't better yourself and keep yourself updated and, share knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I say this probably about once a week to clients when I hear things and I viscerally get mad about, if they tell me that a new client that said that their teacher sent them to me, luckily, that they knew that I did help with contemporary singing. They're in a classically training program right now, a collegiate program, but they were being told not to sing in chest voice and that belting was damaging and bad. But luckily, one of the teachers said, go see this woman. But I say to clients frequently, would you go to an oncologist who had not attended a conference, picked up a journal article, or done anything to further their knowledge of oncology in the last decade? And I think that we as voice teachers, we are liable for something so important that resides in people's body and defines us a lot in a lot of ways as singers. And so I just think that we have such a responsibility to care for those voices. And that requires of us to stay current, because voice science, or let's really say actually evidence-based voice pedagogy, let's take all the components, has so profoundly changed in the last 20 years. Yeah. So it's our responsibility to stay current.
Yeah, I think what you just said is such a powerful thing for people to remember. I think that is such crucial advice, to be up on their learning and to be taking advantage. Like we say, of all the information that's out there. And I think there's never been better times to collaborate as well, because like you said, there's the Nats chats, for example, that you do. There's all these wonderful Facebook groups that encourage debate and discussion. And it's just, I think it's a great time to be able to collaborate in these situations,
And I do not think I have all the answers. I have some pretty good ideas about some things, right? Definitely, I have some ideas. I definitely have some pretty hills that I'll die in. I have a couple hills that I talk about that I'll die on this hill. But like I said earlier, the more I learn, the less I feel like I know. I really wonder how I taught even 20 years ago.
Yes, I have that frequently as well.
Isn't that affirming to know other people feel the same way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, do you ever sit in a lesson and think, oh gosh, how am I going to help this client? What do I have to offer this client in this moment?
Yeah. I frequently have periods of time where you go through that, where you're like, oh, how can I help this person? You want to desperately help them. And, sometimes you get in your own way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just, we've had this conversation before, haven't we, Tom, about how much we just enjoy continuing to learn. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that the more I learn, the more I realise I don't learn, because it just opens so many more avenues. I'm like, oh, I could go and learn about that now. I didn't even realise that was a thing. I didn't even realise that might be useful. And the more you find out about that, you're like, oh, then that goes you off. I love that and I love the masses of information that is available now in comparison to when I first started teaching quite a long time ago. And I love how much more accessible the information is, listening to things like this, podcasts that are out there, just, you can absorb so much free information as well as all of the stuff that is behind a paywall, but that there's just this, it's exciting. I find it exciting.
Well, think about years ago, if I wanted to listen to music, right, I had to go to the listening library for the university degree, right? We used to have to go to a listening library and sit with headphones on, and I don't even remember now, I'm too old, but listen, I'm from the card catalog days. This is a very funny little story. When I started my doctoral work, we were taking a tour the first day, and we went into the library, and I said, where are the card catalog file? Right? Where the little drawers with the cute little piece, right? And the other students looked at me, they're like, how old are you? I was like, well, and I was 38 or something. I think 38 at the time when I started my doctorate. But so anyway, and so at Indiana, even years before that, a decade before that, right, we had to go to a listening library and put on, listen, I'm from the typewriter days where you had to use whiteout when you were writing your paper. So now I've totally lost the point I was, I think the point I was going for was that it's so easy. You can sit in your pajamas at home and learn. Like, there's just no excuse now.
No.
And we have all these incredible organizations, and I love the international collaborations that are going on. I'm program chair for the next International Congress Voice Teachers Conference that'll be in Toronto in August 2025. There's a little plug, which of course E08 is involved with, NATS is involved with, right? And that is a gathering of voice teachers from all over the world. If you've never been to ICVT, please consider coming. It is a wonderful gathering because there are differences across the pond.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there are differences, but there are so many organizations, and people are more accessible now. The leaders in our field, right, are very willing to help and have a conversation with people if you have questions. So yeah, it's a wonderful time to be a voice teacher. It really is. We're just very, very lucky.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so that kind of leads me to my kind of last question then for you. If people want to know a little bit more about yourself, you mentioned your book, but if they want to find out about you or your teaching, where can we point people to?
My website, kariragan.com, would be, it's really kind of just a holding place, where I put things. But yes, my articles, all the articles I've written, I think an interview around my book is probably on there. And then, the book, and then the NATS chats that I do, the conference that I run, the Northwest Voice Art and Science of Performing Voice Conference. Please, if you're in the Seattle area or anywhere in the United States, it is a very special, incredibly affordable, $95 to register for a 2-day multidisciplinary conference. It's pretty special. So, yeah.
Nice. And we'll make sure we'll put links to all of those things in the show notes so people can find out more about them.
That's very nice.
I'm just wondering when you sleep.
I know.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been
Kari,
lovely
for
to chat.
joining us today.
You guys are wonderful. Thank you. So much fun.
So that was Kari, and that was a lovely chat with her, wasn't it?
I know, it was lovely. She was very sweet, and it was really interesting. I love this topic of this what she describes as evidence-based pedagogy, and that's what she talks about in her book a lot of the time. And that was what she talked about in the class that she did for us, was this idea of evidence-based pedagogy. And as I was saying to her, I think there are a lot of people that confuse that for meaning science-based, science researched pedagogy, and that's not actually what she meant by the subject. And actually what she encompasses as evidence-based makes absolute total sense to me. It's kind of the best of all worlds.
Yeah, I was one of those people that evidence-based, it must be scientifically measured or something. That was where my brain immediately jumped to, because I wasn't familiar with it until Kari came in and did her webinar. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and it's a great book as well. I've been working my way through it, and it's a good read. I enjoyed it.
Oh, good. That's nice to know.
Yeah.
I'll borrow it off you when you're finished. So.
Yes, I'll bring it to conference for you, and you can take it away with you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We should do book swaps. We like book swaps.
Yeah, I do. I know. I'm slowly growing my library over the years, and every time we interview somebody with the podcast that has a book, I'm like, oh, Amazon.
Okay, one of those. Add it to the shelf. I love
it's slowly
it.
growing. I love it. Something else that she talked about that I really like, and we have talked about this many, many times before, but is like referring out to other people. you know. And I it's lovely to hear other people talking about that, because as I mentioned when we were talking to her, like, that's something that we think very strongly about, or feel strongly about, referring to other people to get that help and benefit from maybe a more experienced person. And so it's nice to hear that other people in the world are thinking like that too.
I agree. And I have to admit, it's not something that I thought all the way through my teaching career. You know, when I first started teaching, I was very much under the impression that we did have to be everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of pressure. And although saying that, when you first start out, you're kind of blissfully unaware of what you don't know. So you probably think you can be everything to everyone. It's only when you start learning a little bit more, you kind of go, actually, there is no way I'm going to know everything about everything. I mean, it doesn't stop me trying.
Yeah. Well, I think
I'm still out here actively seeking every bit of knowledge I can possibly gather so that I, you know...
But that to me is different, as proclaiming yourself to be an expert in everything. Like, learning it and doing it, you know, like, you know, for your student, and not trying to be like, well, I am a jazz expert and I know everything, but knowing enough to be dangerous, as we would say, you know.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it is something that comes with your experience that you know, you suddenly realize that it's not a flaw. It's not what's the word I'm looking for? My brain stopped working now. You know, it's not a downside to go, that's not my expertise. Here's the name of somebody who does know about that. It's actually a strength.
It is.
It's not a weakness. That's the word I was trying to find. It's not a weakness. But I got there eventually. Just delayed processes. You know. It's not a weakness to go, I don't know enough about this. It's actually a strength, and people, you know, students really kind of respect you for admitting what you don't know and claiming the things that you do know. Going, you know, these are the areas that I know a lot about. These are the areas I don't know much about at all.
Yeah.
You know, I would never think in a million years now that if somebody who wants to be a classical singer walks in my door, I would never even consider the idea that I would be the right person to help them. No chance. I don't speak the languages. I don't know enough about the music. So I would immediately pass them over to somebody who can.
Even though, I mean, like, I've had scenarios where I've referred out because there's a vocal health issue that I'm not comfortable or qualified to deal with myself. And those instances were really helpful for me because the person that I referred to was highly knowledgeable and experienced in that area. And so I got to see an insight. And it's not that I think I know enough now to go and deal with it, but it gave me an idea of what was kind of going on and how to approach it, and kind of made me realise that, you know, it's really helpful to see that person and how they worked and how they dealt with the issue, so that if it comes up again, I can say, hey, I know somebody, they're amazing, I've seen them deal with this before, it's really helpful, we'll go have a lesson, I'll watch, you can have your lesson, and it'll really benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and even I've had situations where, as a younger, less experienced teacher, there's just, you know, that you get that student and you just haven't a clue what's going on, and nothing, like, all your kind of tools and logic just goes out the window because nothing seems to be clicking or working. And so you get really frustrated, and then you're like, and then eventually like, okay, let's find somebody to help.
What do you do, Tom? What was that noise? What did you do?
That's the polite version of what I usually do. But, you know, I mean, like, I think probably a lot of people have been in that situation where you have that student and just nothing seems to work, and somebody else comes in and they're like,
sure.
It's this, and then they show you, and you're like, oh, and next time it happens, you're like, I know exactly what that is. And then you go, and then off you go, you know. So it's a fabulous learning opportunity. Absolutely.
There's a lot to be learned from seeing someone work with your students in general, actually. Just another take on things, just another, you know, approach is sometimes really interesting to see happen. But yeah, you're right. You know, we've said it before and we'll say it again. You know, we're not doctors, we're voice teachers.
Yep.
And so if there is something and we're suspecting there might be something medical going on, it's not our place to tell them what's happening. It's our place to go, it might be a good idea to go and see someone who can look into that.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's always best to err on the side of caution and be like, if you're not sure, you should maybe go and get checked, and let's get the all clear before we start embarking on anything.
That's it.
Much safer. And if they come back and you're like, yeah, I'm healthy, you've got the clean slate to go for it, versus always wondering like, oh, is there something wrong? Am I doing damage? Am I hurting this person?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got more episodes of the podcast coming up that you are not going to want to miss. So Tom, what do people need to do to ensure that they don't miss the next episode?
Yeah, so if you're listening to this in your favourite place to consume podcasts, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so that you get notified when the episode comes out. And if you are watching the videos on YouTube, hi! And click that little subscribe button and hit the bell so that you'll get notified when the videos of these come out. And yeah, we'll pop show notes down below with all the stuff that we talked about in the episode, Kari's book, the Congress of Voice Teachers and all that stuff, if you are interested in any of those. And I think that's about it for this one, eh?
That's it. We will see you next time.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Bye.